we got the story from the Post-Millennial. Biden-Harris administration offers $750 each to victims devastated by Hurricane Helene. The Democratic candidate was relentlessly mocked on social media over the low amount being offered to American taxpayers. The Biden-Harris administration announced $750 would be distributed to residents in states ravaged by Hurricane Helene. The federal assistance will be provided through FEMA, and those who need immediate relief can apply for financial aid at their earliest convenience. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, made the announcement during a visit to Augusta, Georgia, a city that sustained catastrophic damage from the hurricane. Now, I'm actually really pissed to hear this, and I kind of went off early this morning because of the exorbitant amount of money that we've been giving to illegal immigrants, that we've been giving to Ukraine. And I've been ranting over the past 2 weeks, actually longer, but pretty harsh in the past couple of weeks, how Gen Z has been left holding an empty bag when we're supposed to be leaving them behind, this country and reins of control, as they're now moving into their early 20s. They should have families. They should have homes. But every step of the way, it's money for wars, but nothing for the poor. Gen Z, they're coming into the workforce saying we can't even get apartments. How are we supposed to get jobs? Then you see the disaster and they're like, we got $750 for you. Take a look at this from Newsweek. FEMA tapped out for hurricane recovery as GOP points to $1 billion spent on migrants. Surprise, surprise. Republicans called out this spending after Secretary Mayorkas remarks that FEMA was meeting the immediate needs with the money that we have, while adding that the agency did not have enough funding to make it through another hurricane this season. Quote, this is easy. Texas Governor Greg Abbott posted on X, Mayorkas and FEMA immediately stopped spending money on illegal immigration resettlement and redirect those funds to areas hit by the hurricane. Put Americans first. How about Ukraine, too?
I would say that would be totally reasonable, right? They're saying they'll spend maybe tens of millions of billions of dollars on this recovery, but how much have we spent on foreign wars? In foreign assistance this year? It seems crazy. I mean, if you are the average American whose home has been destroyed by these devastating hurricanes and floods, it's hard for me to think that you are now looking at Zelensky going to meet with Putin or not Putin, with Biden or Harris and saying, yes, he deserves the money more than I do.
The other thing, too, is that you see FEMA has given over $600 million in assistance to illegal immigrants to host, for example, a welcome center in San Diego for illegal immigrants. $20 million for that was in April. And it's illegal immigration funding by FEMA all over the country. But for Americans, you've so little. And as an American, I find that infuriating. I pay a lot of money in taxes. And you look out and you think, like, I want roads and I want schools and I want, help for my fellow Americans when they really, really need it. And instead, they're giving away Xboxes in New York. They're giving away hotel rooms for free. They're giving away cell phones at the southern border. They're giving away cash cards. They're giving all this money in rental assistance for illegal immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, and people can't afford the rent because the rent gets artificially jacked up because the government can pay for it. They're giving down payment assistance in Washington State. All of these different things that you see being given out to people who are not our countrymen. And I think that that's a place where certainly Americans, regardless of race or language or gender or, unicorn status or whatever, can come together and agree like Americans should come first.
Well, and the timing of this is so terrible. I mean, we've had, a really, really bad run over the past year. All the liberal pundits can tell you that the economy's great and the GDP this, but the inflation is so high that nobody can afford anything. And these are very red counties across red states that are hit. Going into the election, what does that do for people to vote in such a short time period when they're not in their homes and all that kind of stuff? And just the economics of the sort of average middle class or lower American has been struggling for so long. And now to have this, it's devastating. That's really tough.
Do you think that this is something Americans will be thinking about in November? I've heard a lot of people say, the paperwork, some of the recovery efforts will basically settle in. The money will reach the people in the next 6 weeks. And that really is right about the election. Or is this going to be something that sort of Americans who aren't affected kind of turn their eyes away from and forget about? Because we are, unfortunately, apt to do that.
Yeah, I think that I think Americans will be thinking about it because I think in a lot of ways what's going on now in these southern states shows the disastrous impact of entrenched bureaucracy. So one thing that I was seeing today on social media was a post from someone who was saying like, oh, and you had this firefighter. So there have been people, citizens, volunteers who have resources, like a guy with his own helicopter. And he was going into the mountains of North Carolina. He was actually rescuing people and taking them down the mountain. He gets down the mountain. So this firefighter, he sees somebody needs rescuing. He goes up the mountain. It's him and his son in his helicopter. They're both volunteer firefighters, right? So like skilled people. They take the wife of the family. They bring her down the mountain. They leave the son behind because you can only put 2 people in. So he gets down and the law enforcement there, the fire department, they're like, we're going to arrest you if you keep doing this. And he's like, well, now I left my son up there and there's another guy up there. And eventually he had to go get his son and leave the guy stranded. With the idea that like the law enforcement would go get the guy perhaps in a few hours. And what you have is the local law enforcement saying, you're screwing up our operations. There's another report of somebody saying, FEMA doesn't let you just bring in supplies and distribute them because they have vendors. They have preferred vendors. And of course, every government across the country has a preferred vendors list and you submit to be one of the preferred vendors. And they have quota systems. So you have to check off your various identity boxes to be one of the preferred vendors so that they have the right numbers of all of the different racial boxes checked. Wow. And that's a big thing that happens. And that's at every locality in the country, I'm sure of it, right? That's all over the place. And so you're seeing if a volunteer firefighter from wherever who's got his own helicopter and his kid who's a junior in high school who's also a volunteer firefighter, if they can't go in and help fellow citizens because the government says you're getting in the way and the government says we have our preferred contractors, you can't deliver these supplies, that shows the lie of big government. That shows that big government cannot be a partner in your life and probably should be dismantled in a very large way.
It's kind of terrifying, the authoritarian takeover that happens when you face a disaster. Mm-hmm. That because of a hurricane, not only do you lose everything, but the government comes and asserts authority over your property. We saw this in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. People weren't allowed back into their properties. There was one guy who was barred from his home and he wanted to go see if he had any value. The fire's done. And when he went in, they arrested him. Forcefully threw him down in his own house. And they said, you're not allowed to be here anymore. It's like, but it's your land. Doesn't matter. Your house burned down, therefore you're out. And now that's actually a big component of the story, which we will get to because Elon Musk has got comments about this. There's a firefighter that was trying to rescue people, and they bar people from coming in. So only they get to move in. But don't worry. I know. But they do have $750 for you.
Good.
Maybe you can get a couple weeks, maybe a week's worth of groceries for your family with that.
What I love is that the people who really need this $750 have to apply for it online, but there isn't any internet because there isn't any power.
No. Did you see that one story? I can't remember which county. I think it was in Tennessee. There was like a big central area where people were signing this tarp to say like, I am alive, like because they don't know where their relatives are because there's no cell service, there's no internet. So they're completely isolated in already challenging geographic areas that are now devastated by this waterlog. I think it's fascinating that when people need them most, the government is the most likely to abuse its power, right?
Right, and to get in the way.
Yeah, and so you have this dynamic where people aren't getting the things they need. So many people want to help. And I actually understand when they say, like, if you're a sheriff of a local area and you're like, please don't drive down here in your Prius with the best of intention to get stuck in the mud. Like, I understand those ones. But, I really feel like the Biden administration has used, we don't want to interrupt emergency services. And that's why we're not traveling down right now. That's why Harris isn't going. Biden's going to wait a couple days as an excuse for being like, no, we're working really hard. And also we don't want to go. When we know that there are people who do not feel like they are getting the aid they need.
Biden could have done a flyover. Mm-hmm. That wouldn't have been a problem for him to do. And the thing, too, that you see, it's not just, if there's anything that Americans like to do, Americans like to help each other. And we see that with Governor Ron DeSantis sent a bunch of help, up to North Carolina. And you have the government saying, no, you can't help each other. Mm-hmm. That's not crazy. Something that Americans take kindly to. And if you look there was several years ago that the government really started saying, don't come help, just send money. So they also want us to send money to these NGOs that then abuse that money and use that for their nefarious purposes as well.
We're going to test this theory soon because one of my fraternity brothers lives in Asheville and his community was destroyed. So he fled to Atlanta and we helped him we financed him to rent a U-Haul filled it up with Costco supplies, and he's going back.
Well, do report back.
I mean, yeah, they're the $750 is going to be gone in a week. I mean, that's not going to cover anything. It's not going to cover rent.
No.
And then also, it's going to last for a long time. I mean,
Roads are
water
destroyed.
damage and all this kind of stuff. Even Fort Myers is still dealing with it in Florida.
Asheville officials were saying it's going to take, I think, up to 2 weeks at least to get the water back on.
Of course.
I mean, that's a long time, and especially if someone is trapped somewhere or, unable to find any kind of resources or support, like it becomes critical very rapidly. I don't fault, local governments for struggling to get the water back on. There was serious damage. On the other hand, the federal government stepping in and saying, well, we're going to be in charge here because we know best doesn't seem like it's really working.
I'm going to, for political reasons, step back halfway. And actually, I'm kind of okay with this for a little bit. Now, look, let's be serious. The people in North Carolina and Georgia deserve everything. And this is what we do as members of a family, of a community, of a country. We take care of each other, like you were mentioning with DeSantis sending supplies. I have seen good people on X that I follow who are news commentators and pundits doing everything, even going down there. Shout out to Nick Sorter, who had posted that he was providing Starlink so he can get people connected and get those communications. Robbie Starbuck. I mean, this is fantastic. That being said, I'm reading this Newsweek article and it says the funding shortfall has come under scrutiny at a time when at least $640 million in FEMA funding is being spent on assisting communities across the country dealing with an influx of migrants. I would just like to reframe that in a way that might be politically advantageous to those who are concerned about this crisis, in that the federal government, the Biden-Harris administration, considers the influx of illegal immigrants a federal emergency.
Yeah,
Now,
interesting.
if they believe that the influx of illegal immigrants across this country is a federal emergency, enough that they're going to spend $500 million on all of this, I think we should at least mention that when we're talking about the crisis of over illegal immigration and say it's so bad. Biden-Harris has dumped $500 million because it is a federal emergency. FEMA is footing the bill. Mm-hmm. Then when it comes to the hurricane, fact checkers can come out and say, actually, 750 is the appropriate amount as set by the guidelines. Sure, let's change that. Extenuating circumstances. The people need our help. I don't understand why we're going to spend money resettling illegal immigrants when our own neighbors, the people who make this country as wealthy as it is, are not getting what they need to survive. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.